What's up everyone? Lance Hedrick here, and today I'm excited to show you what I think is the most innovative espresso machine to date. This is the Unica Pro. It is a Swiss-made espresso machine that was created by a few people working in the biotech industry. They went from making high-tech medical devices, which they still do make, that's their main job, into making this machine. Now it's been in the works for about 6 years now, but they only started to release them 1 year ago to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with many other countries on the list, hopefully coming to the USA by next year. As you can imagine, with a brain trust like that, they're gonna pop out something pretty special. My excitement doesn't mean that it's without its flaws. So in today's video, of course, we'll do the typical Lance deep dive, but we're also gonna take a look at what makes it great and also the things that kind of irk me and if there are potential fixes in the pipeline. Their heating system is quite novel. Instead of using dual boilers, which is pretty typical for espresso machines, they opted for another route. Instead of using just thermojets for both the steam and the espresso machine, like the Espresso Duo or using thermal blocks, their whole desire with this was to make an incredibly sustainable machine that had the environment on its mind, consuming as little energy as possible. Now, when you first look at this machine, what's the first thing that you think of? Yes, me too. That it comes with its own microphone. It's pretty amazing. If you could now for a short segment from today's sponsor, BetterHelp. You know, I make jokes all the time on here about my neurodivergency, and I know a lot of you have really appreciated me being open about it, but it's something that is not the greatest thing in the world. It took me a while to kind of get over that, but it's really important to embrace mental health and bettering yourself. So if you're someone like me that struggles with anxiety or depression or PTSD, your brain's going 1,000 miles a minute, then BetterHelp might be a good option for you. You get on, you answer a few questions, you get partnered with a therapist, and then you're good to go. And using my link below in the caption will give you a 10% discount on your first month. Full transparency, it does help this channel. I do think it is something that could help you as well. Thank you BetterHelp for sponsoring this video, and let's make sure that we prioritize our mental health, as that is such an important and crucial aspect of our everyday life with regards to social relationships as well as personal well-being. Let's continue on with the video. They have a thick heating pad that is 1,800 watts right about here. Water goes from the pump, which we'll talk about in a bit, to this heating pad, and it heats up the water up to plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius to your target temperature. But that's not where it ends. It continues traveling to the heated brew group, which has 4 heating cells in there in order to equalize the temperature to plus or minus 0.5 degrees Celsius of your target temperature. Because you can't rely on just a massive thermal mass that's going to retain temperature, it's dynamic. So if you want to take a recipe that is 96 degrees Celsius and you want to switch to another recipe that's 80 degrees Celsius, you want something that's not going to retain a ton of thermal mass. You want something that can switch like that. So to kind of demonstrate this capability of the machine to switch between temperatures quickly due to the low thermal mass, the addition of the peak, etc., I have my espresso recipe and my ristretto recipes set to 80 degrees and 96 degrees respectively. Down here in the bottom right, you see the current brewing group temperature. Now that is set to what espresso was set to, 91 degrees Celsius. I've set the espresso now to 80 Celsius. So in order to get that 91 down to 80, because that's a big temperature drop, we just need to do 2 flushes on our espresso recipe. Boom, it does a 20 milliliter flush, which is gonna get out a lot of that hot water from the previous shot I pulled at 91. We go back, we're now at 86 degrees, we're gonna do another flush. And this should get us down to 80 degrees in that brew group, due again to that low thermal mass. Yeah, we're about 83. So probably one more flush would get us there. The temperature sensor can be affected due to the steel that is in the group head. So they were showing on some of their own temperature testing that you want to take the first 5 seconds of the extraction out of the equation because it's needing to equalize with the water actually going through it. So we're probably right around that 80 degree mark right now. It's showing 82, but I mean, we're probably at 80. Let's switch to the ristretto, which I have set to 96. We're just gonna flush it and it should get us back to temperature up to about 96. So let's do a full 20 milliliter flush. Now we're gonna go back, we're gonna look at the brew group temperature. So it shot up to 97. Pretty good. There's no brass, there's no copper. They wanted it to all be commercial stainless steel for the cleanest, most hygienic experience that one could possibly imagine. On top of that, the only other parts that ever touch water is Teflon and PEEK. Most every machine I've ever seen has food safe plastics inside with the tubing. That's similar to what's going on here. Everything else, literally, even the water tray, which we'll look at in a second, is stainless steel. Aiming at energy sustainability, they actually opted for a 1/2 liter steam boiler. Now this might seem like an odd decision, but what they were telling me is that to heat up half a liter of water and convert it to steam, it takes 4,000 watts. Whereas with something like a thermojet, it would take 2,500 watts. On paper, that sounds like, oh, of course you'd want the thermojet. But if you were to steam multiple times with the thermojet, it's 2,500 watts essentially every time, because it's only taking a small amount of water and flash heating it. So if you're steaming more than one, they argue it's more sustainable to use a half-liter boiler so that you can steam once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Once you have it to boiling, it's very minimal wattage to maintain that pressure. And because of the steam boiler, they're able to get up to 3 bar of pressure coming out, which is great for a commercial environment. And I'll show you that right now. Look at that. I want to be where the people are. They aimed initially at this being like a small commercial machine. You can put it in a roastery, you can put it on a coffee cart, you can put it in a small shop, mobile trailer, whatever it might be. And of course at home, a lot of people are doing more than one cappuccino. I've not been able to measure the energy consumption of this versus something like a thermojet, so I can't speak to it. But assuming their numbers are correct, this is an advantageous aspect of this machine for those of you that steam a lot of milk. With a high-tech sensor inside the group head, once you pull the portafilter out, it'll auto flush. You also have the hot water over here, which is actually a fantastic hot water spout. It's my favorite one I've ever seen on an espresso machine. You can set a specific volume and you will hit that volume with plus or minus 0.5 grams. You can also set the temperature and save 3 different profiles with the hot water spout. You need 80 degrees Celsius at 300 mils for green tea. Boom, that can be option 1. You need 40 degrees Celsius for 100 mils for some formula. Boom, option 2. You need 90 degrees Celsius for a really hot Americano. Boom, that's you're wanting in that cup. That's pretty awesome. I use it whenever I'm doing, my bypass methods. If it's a fast shot like a Nomicano, I know the liquid coming out is quite hot. I don't need as hot of water to, dilute it. If I'm doing something like a filter 2.1, it's gonna be much cooler coming out because it's dripping a bit more slowly. It's losing a lot of temperature. I need hotter water in order to bring it to a temperature that I enjoy. And this is honestly what I think is my favorite thing about it. It's a pump that they made that weighs 13 kilograms. It is a Big Daddy. Yeah, about that big. All right, and it sits tilted just like so. Now what this is a flow displacement pump, and it's run by a step motor, and the piston is driven by a ball screw. It takes up to 300 milliliters of water, cold water, and it's because if the water was already heated, it could form scale on the inside, so it brings in cold water, then it pushes it through the heating system. So you have incredibly accurate volumetrics here. With every turn of that stepped motor, you get 0.001 milliliters of flow. That is insanely granular and way superior to any other machine on the market that either relies on an algorithm or that relies solely on a flow meter. This is giving you insanely accurate flow displacement. That's how you can get such incredible accuracy on that hot water spout when you program volume. The drops at the end you can't really control. That's gonna potentially skew the reading a bit, but let's get this going, 50 mils and go. So it's starting at negative 0.04, but anyway, here we go. All right, so that was 48.75. So we're gonna do it one more time, and we'll see if it kind of corrects based off of the amount that may be kind of left in the spout, in the nozzle. Here we go. All right, so it's at 98. So it was a gram off on each, so that's not terrible. We'll go one more time out of curiosity. I'm gonna do 100 mils and see if more of a volume is gonna be more helpful. There we go, it's at 99.2. That is pretty dang accurate. I know Meticulous is working with something like that. Duval's been working with something like that. But as far as a machine that's tangible on the market and is built to these specs, this is the only one that I can really get my hands on that allows for up to 300 mils and that is built as robustly as this one is. With their advanced algorithms that they have throughout the machine itself, it is able to do loads of different types of profiles with a ridiculous amount of control over them. But another attempt of theirs is to render scale essentially useless whenever using espresso machines. So for a while, people have been, freaking out about the potential use of gravimetrics on machines. It predicts when it's going to hit a certain weight based off a certain flow, so it can stop within a gram or two of your desired weight. Now, I've never had incredible replicability with gravimetrics. I mean, I'll get within 2 grams often, but because of different types of espresso shots, you're doing turbo shots, it's much harder for the machine to nail that every time. This one, however, is able to get insanely precise volumetrics because it's measuring the amount of flow that's being displaced after it senses a certain pressure change in the puck. It understands that the flow is starting to exit the puck, and it starts to measure the amount that's been displaced in order to give you accurate replication. Once you are dialed in and you're on the optimal range of their grind analyzer, yes, they have one, I'll talk about it in a bit, it gives you within plus or minus 0.4, 0.5 grams without having to use a scale. Now, recently I did a lot of data acquisition for a video on spritzing water on your coffee grounds, which is here, because it's a flow first machine, gives me a lot more consistency, and I did not even need to use a scale. I did because I needed to mark down how much weight came out in order to give me the exact extraction yield calculation, but I didn't touch it to stop it. With the constant firmware updates, you get more and more capability with the machine you've already bought. Based off of a request that I made along with Dr. Samo Smirke, a friend of mine, we were on a big conference call, and I just posed the question, is there a way that we could make this have temperature dynamicy within the bloom? So being able to control the temperature of the bloom to a lower degree in order to do, like a Samo bloom on this machine. So give me like a 60 degrees Celsius blooming period or pre-infusion period, and then increasing the temperature once the liquid starts to fall through the puck. Since it has such a quick heating system, I was like, it should be able to do that with a little bit of tweaking. They said, absolutely, we can do that. And within 3 days, I had an email with the firmware update. Boom, put it in, works like a charm. The max flow rate they could achieve here was 6.5 grams a second. But because there's a lower ceiling for the drawing of electricity in the US, with everything the same on those plug systems, they'd only be able to get 5 grams a second, which for me was not ideal. I like really fast saturation rates. So I asked, if we're not spending energy to heat up water during that pre-infusion phase, could that free up some wattage in order to give us a higher flow rate? Their answer was, yeah, it should. So now on that firmware update, I am able to go down to about 60 degrees Celsius for my pre-infusion, and I can go up to 10 grams a second for the saturation phase. And then it's able to lower for the, for the full infusion, for the actual extraction. They want to make this as good as it can be. There are other things in here I'll point out as we go through the menu that need some updates. These will be easy updates for them to make in order to make it a more user accessible, user friendly, and more diverse machine as a whole. Let's pull a shot. First off, we have the extraction settings. There are 3 of these settings you can control in the basic profile. So we can set the temperature. We can set what the single shot volume is, double shot volume. That's essentially saying how many grams do you want pulled out. And then we have the extraction time, so 32 seconds. We can click down here for extended. Now we have 7 options. Temperature, the weight of your dose if you want to log that so you can kind of remember in future pulls. Next, we have the pre-infusion flow rate. So how fast do you want that puck to be filled? You could go lower, you can go higher. I always put it to the max, 5 mils a second. Then we have the pre-infusion pressure factor. This is really interesting. This is a factor that's based off a pretty complex algorithm in order to control the reaction of the flow rate going into the puck as the pressure begins to increase, which can kind of offset the incapability of doing really high flow rates, similar to a spring lever, which might hit 50 grams a second of flow rate for the initial saturation. So this is something that can kind of offset that and gives really unique in-cup differences that really need to be experienced. It's difficult to explain, but essentially these factors refer to the lessening of the flow rate as the pressure hits a certain limit. So on the next slide, we're going to see what that pressure is. So pre-infusion pressure threshold. This is the threshold where the flow will begin to change from the P factor. Let's say we have a 0.03 pressure factor. That's essentially saying 30% of that original flow rate is going to be taken off as it's increasing the pressure. We have the flow that goes up to, let's say, 5 mils a second, and the pressure slowly builds. So here we are, and then pressure hits 5. Okay, as it hits 5, that flow detects it and begins to decrease by 30%. Then once it hits 5, it's going to drop all the way to 2 mils a second, which is the flow control for this default espresso setting. So it hits 2 mils a second for the duration of the shot, and the pressure does what the pressure does based off of the resistance of your grind setting and the coffee and the density of the puck itself. It's a flow profile espresso shot that is based off of whatever you set the pre-infusion to, whatever you set the P factor to, and the pre-infusion threshold when the pre-infusion at that flow rate stops. So when does it switch from that flow rate down the percentage of the P factor to 2 milliliters a second for the duration of the shot? We have extraction volume 50 mils and of course extraction time. So we get here, we're going to hit start double. Now this is just a random coffee I threw in, and also the graphing on here you can do without the lines. I like looking at the lines, it gives me a better idea of what's going on. But of course this blue line at the top is the flow, and as you see it starts to cascade down pretty quickly as that pressure raises. So with this coffee I have it way too coarse. It can't hit 9 bar with what I have. So now the flow has dropped down to what it's supposed to, around 1.5 to 2 mils a second, as that pressure is really low because I didn't go fine enough. At the end of this shot, it should tell us that we ground too coarsely with the grind analyzer. The shot is done, and look, the grind analysis says pre-infusion 16.5 seconds, extraction 32 seconds, total was 48.5 second shot. And that's because it switched down, I gotta fill the tank. There's a sensor in there, tells us to fill the tank. It will never run out during a shot though. Better time than ever to show you the water tank since I have the notification to change it. So after we take off the drip tray, which is held on here by these 2 powerful magnets, the water tank is right here, and it's stainless steel. Super high quality, really nice. Can throw it in a dishwasher, which you should probably once a week, so there's no film kind of growing on it. It has a 1.8 liter capacity, which is more than good enough for quite a few shots. And of course, you can plumb this machine in if you are catering events or doing something along those lines. Once you're done, you just have to line it up, which can be tricky the first time you do it. Make sure it's at the right angle. See, I don't like that noise. Ooh, 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 ooh. But you want to make sure you push it all the way in so that the little capacitor reader can actually fit inside that hole in order to read when you're out of water. Now we're done. We can put the drip tray back on. Just magnetizes in place right there. Boom. But anyway, so there's our grind analysis. We can scroll over and see the graph as well once we're done. What I could do is just change the grind size with the same dose, and we can pull it again in order to see if we get that optimal range so we can see a more proper pressure curve. Because ideally it would hit that 9 bar, and since it's staying static at around 1.5, 2 mils a second, I guess it's 1.5 mils a second because that's what it's showing there. But because of that, that pressure should begin to decrease near the end unless we've ground just way too finely. I always recommend people start more coarsely and then go more finely, so we actually started at a good spot with this unknown coffee. Then we'll go a little finer, pull another shot, and we'll see what that grind analyzer and that graph have to tell us after this. And this time I will actually use the scale. Since we should be much closer to the right grind size, we should be getting pretty good volume. So let's go back, espresso, double. Here we go. So it starts off, we're at 4.7, 4.8 mils per second. The pressure is slowly going to raise up, and as you can see, the flow begins to cascade down. That's the p-value. We can change the aggression of that based off of going up or down with the p-value. So we're raising up to about 8.2 bar, so it's descending pretty quickly even at 1.6 mils a second. It's probably not a bad shot though. It's probably be kind of tasty. Let's see. Could have gone a little finer and we would have been good, but there we go anyway. Let's see where it stops. So it was too coarse. It stopped at 53 grams. So it's on the right side of optimal. If we would to have gone a bit more to the center, we will have, the output should be right at 50 grams. So, but I'm sure this shot actually tastes pretty good. An 8 peak with a rapidly declining pressure. It tastes really nice actually. That's a good tasting coffee. And all of these profiles, you can extract it onto a thumbnail or via Wi-Fi in order to share it with someone else. You can dial in a shot and you can save it. So this is where you can plug in a FAT32 formatted thumbnail in order to extract or import updates. They already have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi enabled, and they're currently working on an app for the machine to make things even more streamlined. Though to be honest, the thumbnail is very easy and very quick. You just need to create a folder on your thumbnail that says recipes in all caps so that the machine recognizes it. And then when someone sends it to you zipped up, you toss it in there, machine reads it, downloads it, boom, it's super quick. In order to import a recipe, all you need to do is go to custom on this screen, go to the end, create your own recipe, go all the way over and click import. No stick is found, but if there was, it would import whatever recipe was there and would show up on the screen. That's how I was able to import the Samo Lance Bloom espresso shot that is now in the new firmware update. So if we scroll over on the recipes, Lance-Samo temperature profile, and Lance-Samo bloom spec. So on this, they now have extraction settings from 80 to 98 degrees Celsius, but we can go to extended. We can go to extraction settings, which is 20 grams of coffee. Pre-infusion flow rate, I have it at 10 mils a second, but it can go from 0.5 to 10 with this cooler bloom because it's not taking as much wattage. I have the P factor at 0.06, so 60% less flow. It's going to have a more intense decrease in flow as the pressure begins to rise. This is going to change the filtration of the puck. The intensity of that water going on it is going to change the interaction of pressure with the puck, which is going to change the filtration capability of the puck. It's a really fun thing to experiment with. You have pre-infusion pressure threshold, so when pre-infusion kind of stops. Pre-infusion temperature, so I have it at 60 degrees Celsius. You have blooming pressure. I have that at 1.5 bar, but you can put that down to 0 bar, whatever. That just means it's going to cascade down until whatever pressure you want, and then it'll use flow to maintain that pressure for the blooming period or the blooming timeout, which you control right here, up to a minute. Then you have extraction pressure limit. So if you want it to go all the way up to 9, or if you want it to be at 3.4, or you want it to be, at 3, which is probably where it should be, you're good there. Then you have 50 milliliters for the extraction yield, but you can go up to 100. And that's one of the things I think they could work on, is not having these arbitrary limits. I don't think 100's bad necessarily, but there is, on the Lungo, you can go up to 200. So why not just make this up to 200? Same with the time. They have an arbitrary 60-second time limit, and I know that it can do longer than 60 seconds. In fact, it often pulls shots longer than 60 seconds if the grind is too fine or something along those lines. So there are some nitpicks I have with the firmware currently where they're kind of putting arbitrary limits on certain variables that I would not like to be limited on. Stop putting me in a box. Let me run free. Don't tell me I can only do 100 milliliters of extract. I know that 200 is possible because in the Lungo, it shows up to 200. I know 300 is possible because the flow pump is up to 300 mils, so it can keep pushing up to 300. So some of these are simple firmware updates that can be made and should be made so that you're not really holding me back. Also, I don't see a control over the exact flow rate outside of pre-infusion. And I obviously know that's controllable too, because they control it on the back end with, for instance, the normal espresso recipe going down to 1.6 mils per second. But just to take a look at these different options on the menu, we have hot water, which, as I said, has 3 savable recipes. Mine, I have 80 degrees for 50 mils, 90 for 150 mils, 88 for 100 mils. We have espresso, the single, the double, and here you can go in and change more of the controls. So for a single, it's 25 seconds, for a double, 32 seconds, a single, 25 mils, a double, 50 mils, etc., etc. You come over, you have ristretto, you have lungo, which of course with lungo, it's going to be much different. If we go to extended, we have temperature, we have the dose of the coffee, we have the flow rate of the pre-infusion, we have the P factor, so that's going down 20% if it's 0.02. We have 6 bars of pre-infusion threshold, extraction volume's 90 mils, it goes up to 200, and then 25-second shot. Go back. We have Americano, which is just going to program the water temperature and everything as well. The Lance-Samo temperature, which this one is just more like an espresso shot that has the capability of the higher flow rate, 10 mils a second. The P factor here, the temperature of the pre-infusion threshold, there's the temperature, it's set at 48 degrees. Then we go to 9 bar as the pressure limit. We have the extraction volume, and finally we have the time. But you can also set up, I have an Italian recipe, a blooming, like a standard blooming shot without the temperature change. You can do a lever style shot using pressure profiling. So when you're creating recipes in here, you click settings, you click custom, you go to create your own recipe. You can scroll over to pressure profiling, and then you can control how many number of phases you want, up to, let's see, how many phases? 9. You can go up to 9 phases of changing the pressure throughout the shot, and you can change the duration of those pressures, and you can change the rate at which they go from pressure to pressure based off of bar per second down to 0.1 bar per second. I'll just show you my recipe. I have 3 steps on here, 3 stages of pressure change. 91 degrees Celsius, 20 gram dose, 5 mils a second fill rate for pre-infusion. I have a 0.08 pre-infusion factor, so that means that the flow will even more aggressively decrease once pressure begins to be detected in the puck. Now, it is important to note right now that at any given second during the extraction, all the data points are being taken note of 100 times a second. So that's giving you extremely robust amounts of data to rely upon. So whenever it's talking about the pre-infusion threshold and it's talking about the P factor and how the flow rate is going down as pressure is being read, this is extremely precise. It's not like, oh, we're now at like 0.5 bar this time. Now we're at like 1.2 this time. We're roughly around pressure. No, it's extremely precise and is just constantly reading the temperature, the pressure, and all other data points that the machine is able to read. So we have the pressure threshold, we've got the step 1 pressure. So I want it to immediately, after pre-infusion, go up to 9 bar. I want it to, for the pressure profile volume, for this whole shot, I want 45 gram shot. I want the step 1 timeout, so how long is step 1 gonna last? I want it to last 10 seconds. So I want it to hit 9 bar and last for 10 seconds during that time of getting to 9 and holding 9. And then the pressure ramp to the next profile or to the next pressure, I want it to be as fast as possible. So I want it 3 bar a second. I want it to decline rapidly. The next one is the step 1 pressure ramp. So it's essentially how quickly do you want that top pressure that you programmed, how quickly do you want the pressure in the puck to be ramped to that pressure? That makes sense. So essentially, how quickly from pre-infusion to 9 bar do you want it to hit? So I want it 3 bar a second. I want it to hit 9 bar immediately, kind of like on a spring lever. Right when you pull up, it goes up to 9 bar due to that spring. So I have it at 3 bar a second, the fastest rate you can do. The next step is step 2 pressure. I want the pressure of step 2 to go down to 4 bar. So it's not going to immediately go to 4 bar. That's what the step timeout is. Over 20 seconds, I want it to go down to 4 bar, and I want it to be at 0.3 bar per second. So it kind of goes down linearly, kind of like a lever would. Okay, and then there is step 3 pressure, which I have just at 2 bar, just have a third stage in there, 10 seconds for the timeout, and I just have it at 3 bar a second, just randomly. So we can just take a look at what this looks like by pulling a quick shot. All right, let's get this going. So of course we start off again with about 4.5, 5 milliliters per second of flow. And then as that pressure slowly starts to raise, that flow is coming down due to the P factor I have put in. If I had a 0 P factor, that flow would maintain at the highest mark until it hit 9 bar. But because it doesn't, because it starts sloping down, that's showing us that we have a pretty aggressive P factor. So I had the 9 bar, and now it is slowly going down over 20 seconds to 4 bar. So we had 10 seconds for the timeout of the 9 bar shot. Now it's going down linearly over time, 0.3 bar per second until it gets to 4 bar. And then the timeout continues till it hits the 22nd. And then there we go. It goes down now to 2 bar, where it's going to maintain for 10 seconds because that's the timeout I have. So I had this much too fine to hit the proper weight by the time it was done, and the grind analysis should show us too finely ground. Uh-oh. Awkward. Well, it's not showing us that we ground too finely. There is no grind analysis with this. For some reason, it's not showing it for me on the lever declining. So to the people from Unica watching, this should also be in the firmware update. I don't see a grind analysis on this one, but obviously it only pulled out 17 grams in the time that I allotted. It did everything correct. I just had much too finely ground coffee in there. So in order to make this better, I just need to go a bit coarser, and we should hit the amount we need within that time frame. And since it's not even available in the States yet, all of this should be fixed before it is globally available, currently just in the 3 European countries. I think that was a good enough thing to kind of show you that you can pressure profile with extreme accuracy as well, because the pump is reacting in real time to the puck, and because it has such incredible control over flow rate, it's able to read the puck's resistance in real time and is able to make those adjustments in real time to make sure it is an extremely accurate and precise pressure control. I never use the pressure profiling, to be honest with you, because I find a lot more accuracy and consistency when using the flow first control. As I said, when I was gathering data, I used just the typical ESPRESSO profile on here, and I found that whenever I was using a specific P factor, one that's a little bit more gentle on the puck, about 0.06, when it went down to that 1.6 mils per second, it allowed a much more consistent workflow for me, and I was able to get all of my shots within a second of each other and the same output within 0.4 grams or so. On top of all that, since we're using flow first, it allows every beam to react accordingly. If we did pressure first, then pressure is going to force certain flows even if the puck's not wanting it. Flow is an incredibly important distinguishing feature to pressure because flow is the amount of water going through at any given second. A higher flow rate going through a puck can dislodge more of the astringent particles and other particulates to get into your cup regardless of the pressure. It's that high flow rate that can dislodge and pull them through. Two pucks, one that readily disintegrates and it doesn't want to hold hold 3 bar at the end, and one that has a huge puck integrity and doesn't matter, you can throw 0.5 mils of water on it and it's going to hold 3 bar. These are going to have two completely different flow rates going through the puck if you are pressure profiling. Now, if you're flow profiling, you're letting the puck dictate the pressure so that you're not going up in that flow, which can dislodge some of those particulates. So you're actually getting a more tasty shot as well, at least in my experience. Whenever we have that 1.6 mils per second static flow, some beans may have an insane dip in pressure. Some beans may have a slower dip because of their inherent puck integrity based off of the grind size, the tamping, etc., the roast level, whatever you have. And this, again, I would like to be able to set the flow rate. So essentially, they kind of have that stock flow rate going down to 1.6 or so. I would like to be able to say I want it at 3 mils per second for the whole shot, or 1 millisecond the whole shot. I would like to have control over that extraction flow rate. So after pre-infusion, what flow rate does it go to? And currently, I don't have that. I know that's a very easy update to make. And I'm assuming they're holding that back to not complicate things, but I wish that it was in the extended menu. For people that don't want extended, don't click extended. But for those that do, I think it should be loaded in the extended menu, and I give them a week to put that on there. But of course, we go up here to settings. You can change the display brightness pretty easily. If you want to show the grid on the actual grid, if you want to see the lines, or you can have it just blank. Show live values, which I like to see as well. Custom, this is where you make your custom recipes. They have a very complex energy menu to have different settings. So you can have the eco setting, which is standby in 5 minutes. It'll kind of turn off to standby. Normal, which is standby in 45 minutes. High, which is standby, is deactivated and also keeps the cup warmer at a certain time. The steam boiler is inactive. I have it inactive because on high I don't use it, but you can make it active. Cup temperature heater is at 70 on high, at 60 at normal. So that's something I neglected to say is underneath this top shell, there is a thin pad that keeps temperature due to leftover energy from the machine. It holds temperature up here, 60 to 70 degrees Celsius to warm your cups up. So that's a pretty neat thing. Brew group temperature is at 90. So custom is standby is deactivated, steam boiler temp, the steam boiler is not activated, yada, yada, yada. So there's all these different things you can do to have your energy settings optimized for your situation. System, we can check for updates using Wi-Fi, or you can put the USB stick in. Time and date, of course. Maintenance, you can have it remind you every day to do back flush, which it reminds me. You can do auto flushes after every brew, which I don't have activated. I guess I'll put it active. And you can make it 20 mils up to 50 mils. 20 mils is more than adequate. Descaling routine, you have fluid system. So this would be to empty your pump or empty the system. That's to get all of the water out if you need to store it, or if you think you've not changed water in a while and it could be gross in there, or if you need to transport it somewhere. This is an incredible feature that not nearly enough machines have. Sanremo U, you've got to take off a lot of bits to get to the boiler to drain it. But on something like the Rancilio Silvia Pro X, they have this feature of draining the boilers, and this has the feature of getting all of the water out of the system, which I think is just so necessary, especially when you're shelling out the money for something like this. We have language, obviously, steam timer. This is because they say you can steam without using your hands on their machine. So you can set a steam timer. You can set the pitcher on here, put the steam one in at the proper height, hit go, and it'll steam for a certain amount of time. So you can set it like that. You'll hit it, it'll start, and at the end of it, it'll stop, obviously. All right. And then you have shot history. It'll show you the last 50 shots on here. So we have 50 shots. It's going to show me the graphs. Then if I scroll on it, boom, it goes to grind analysis. So on all of them, I can go to the second one, grind analysis. Third one, grind analysis. And it's showing me the profiles for all of these. Espresso double, all those are espresso double. There we go, Lance-Samo, Bloom, Lance Lungo. So you have all these different things all capable right there. I'm gonna auto steam some milk and pull a shot, and we'll pull a little Lart. I'm pretty skeptical. I'm gonna move it just a smidge. We're gonna stop it there. All right, we're gonna go and stop the shot too. I didn't dial this in, we're just having fun. Not too shabby, actually. Yeah, if you work on that wand placement, it's not too shabby. Look at that. I mean, that's not bad milk texture for hands-free. It was high pressure because it barely stretched and it still gave me more than enough foam to make a flat white. I think that kind of showcases pretty well all the capabilities of the Unica Pro in its current format. I do think there's a lot of room for improvement on the firmware updates. I'm not a big fan of the aesthetic. The leaning bit of this kind of makes me a little uneasy. It looks like it's going to fall on you, and honestly, it's not that top heavy, but it's not too difficult to push forward. It's obviously much more difficult to lean back. With everything that it has, with the quick heat up time, the thermo adaptability because of the low thermal mass, with the temperature accuracy, the quick heat up time, with precise flow control down to 0.001 milliliters, the massive pump in here that's never going to scale because it doesn't have hot water in it, and on top of all that, the sustainability aspect of it. If you were to measure 1 year of this in eco mode, it would consume 70 kilowatts. The corollary reading on a dual boiler would be over 1,500 kilowatts. So in Switzerland, for instance, that would save you, if you used this over a dual boiler, over 440 Swiss francs per year, so like almost $500. I don't see the need for boilers anymore in the espresso industry. They are just very, very inefficient when it comes to energy draw, and they just, with how expensive electricity is nowadays, with how everything is, I don't think we need to be drawing that much energy in order to enjoy an espresso if we have something much more capable in a much smaller size. And you don't have to spend $7,000-8,000 for something like this to have all of that. A lot of cheaper machines come with these, like a lot of the Brevils have their Ferro system, the thermojet system, or you have the Escassos have something similar. You have some with thermoblocks. Now, thermoblocks and even more efficient thermojet systems tend to pull about 400 kilowatts a year, and this is down to 70. So this still has an edge on most of the options out there, but in reality, all of them are much better than the dual boiler system. I'm excited about the potential of this machine and what it will be introducing to us into the future with more flow capable machines, with something that is first and foremost a flow profiler. Like the default settings on here are flow based, which is fantastic. The fact that it's using a seamless pump, a step driven pump, a step motor, as opposed to a vibration pump, which is going to jut and hammer the puck at different peaks and valleys during the flow rate and during the pressures. This is going to give us a much smoother piston-driven operation, more akin to a lever. This is actually the first robotic lever in a way because it's piston driving the water through the puck, which is given a more consistent experience, replicating those styles of lever shots. Having the capability of higher flow rate, having the capability of opening up more of the variables for the end user, having that app that they're working on be public, making everything just a little bit more user-friendly. I think this is going to be the top kind of end game machine, at least in the current field. Now, and that's taking into account the GS3, the Sanremo U, the Decent, the ES1. This one right now kind of leads the way as far as all of its tech promises and fulfillments, as far as the accuracy, as far as the sustainability. I just think it is an awesome machine. Now, this is on loan to me from Unica. There's obviously going to be bias introduced, but this isn't my first time borrowing a machine. I hope that I was able to kind of explain some of the things on here. Even obviously, most of you are not going to be able to afford a machine like this sitting at 7,500 euros. Hopefully, they're going to put it at 8,000 US dollars when it's in the American market. But it is good to understand some of this tech that's now coming out to look for in future iterations of other machines as we go forward into the future. A lot of this tech, I'm sure, will be made a lot more cheaply. They only sell about 5 machines monthly, and they make them in batches of 50 units. Because of the small orders they're making, their prices for material are much higher than a company that can produce loads and loads and loads of parts, can order a lot of parts and get bulk discounts. Some of this is because it's made in Switzerland, so it's a lot higher wages. Some of this is because of the high quality parts. Some of it is the R&D, but it is something I think is incredibly intriguing and will hopefully inform the future of espresso machines, just as the Decent did, and just as the E61 did, and just as the 1948 Achille Gauge spring lever machine did. There's a lot to be learned from this, and I'm excited about what we're going to learn based off of it. Check my links down below. Look at my Patreon, my Instagram, my second YouTube channel where I do some rants live. Yeah, and thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring the video. I hope that you brew something tasty today, and cheers.